She saved a stray monkey and had no clue it would one day save her right back. The scream came out of nowhere, sharp, desperate. Emma slammed on her bike brakes, skidding hard across the gritty pavement. Her eyes snapped to the alley beside her. A small monkey, shivering, dirty, eyes wide with fear, darted into view. Its tiny body shook as it clutched a ragged cloth, looking like it had not eaten in days. "Gross," someone muttered, stepping back. Another voice chimed in, laughing. "Hope it does not have rabies." Emma's heart hammered, but she was not thinking about fear. Not now. Slowly, she stepped off her bike and crouched low. The monkey's eyes locked onto hers, wide, searching, like it had been waiting for someone to care. "Easy, buddy. It's okay," Emma whispered, her voice barely above the city's hum. The monkey did not run. Not this time. It took one shaky step forward, then another, until it collapsed right into her arms, bony and cold. Emma hugged it close, her chest tight. She did not care who was watching. She did not care what they said. All she knew was, this little creature needed her. What Emma could never have imagined, what not a single person watching her could have guessed, was that this tiny, helpless monkey would soon unlock the biggest secret of her life and change everything, forever. Emma Carter grew up in a place where dreams were as thin as the cracked sidewalks. A tiny town in Indiana where people smiled to your face but kept score behind your back. Her family, barely hanging on. Her dad, Mike, was a mechanic. Gritty hands, worn-out eyes, and her mom, gone before Emma hit her teens, leaving behind a stack of unpaid bills and silence no one dared to fill. At school, Emma was the quiet one, the girl with thrift store clothes and a backpack patched up with duct tape. Teachers barely noticed her, except to remind her that her homework was late. Kids whispered behind her, snickering when her shoes were too old or her hair too messy. "She will never get out of here," they used to say. But Emma had something none of them saw. At night, while the rest of the world slept, she sat on the floor of her tiny bedroom, eyes glowing from the screen of a hand-me-down laptop. She taught herself everything: coding, digital security, crypto trading. It started small, a few dollars here, a few there, learning the ropes through online forums and tutorials. By 23, she had quietly built a small fortune in cryptocurrency, never flashy, always careful. Until it happened. One bad update, one glitch, one wrong click, and just like that, her digital wallet locked her out. All her earnings vanished behind a password she could not recover. She tried everything: recovery tools, help forums, even deep dive hacks. Days turned into weeks, then months, her hope shrinking by the hour. Friends told her to move on. Strangers online laughed at her loss. But Emma, she was not built to give up. And then came that night in the alley. The night she found him. The monkey. She named him Max. Max was scrappy and sharp-eyed, with quick little hands and a stare that seemed to read straight through her. She brought him home, set up a box with old blankets, and fed him peanut butter sandwiches from the kitchen. Night after night, as Emma sat at her desk staring at that frozen crypto wallet, Max curled up beside her, eyes flicking between the screen and her face, watching. Always watching. Something about him made her feel less alone, like they were both locked out of something bigger than themselves. And neither of them was giving up just yet. Emma's world was boxed in by fences, brick walls, and quiet judgments. Her town, Ridgewood, looked peaceful from the outside. Neat houses, trimmed hedges, rows of smiling faces at Sunday markets. But beneath the surface, everything was about status. If you had money, you mattered. If you didn't, you were invisible. She worked at a cluttered repair shop called Tech Stop, stuck between a nail salon and a pawn shop, where flickering neon lights buzzed louder than the customers. The walls were lined with shelves of broken printers, cracked phones, and dusty hard drives waiting for someone to care enough to fix them. Emma cared, but no one noticed. Her boss, Gary, sat in his tiny glass office with a permanent frown and a coffee mug that never left his hand. "Emma," he'd bark across the room, "clock out if you were just sitting there staring at screens again." He had no clue the depth of what she was working on. No clue that the girl behind his counter had once managed thousands in crypto before it slipped through her fingers. Outside the shop, the world felt just as small. The town square was lined with the same people every day. Linda at the bakery, who always looked her up and down before handing over a bagel. Mark, the delivery guy, who barely met her eyes. Conversations were short. Smiles were stiff. No one cared what Emma was trying to rebuild. And yet, every evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. There was one face waiting for her outside the back door. Max, the little monkey, had carved out his own space in her life, waiting on the fire escape, swinging gently from the rails, his eyes shining like he knew something no one else did. He seemed to understand the rules of the town, too, keeping his distance from strangers, melting into the shadows when eyes turned sharp. In a place where people only saw what they wanted, Max and Emma had created a quiet world of their own, one that felt, somehow, like it was about to crack wide open. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those gray, heavy days where the air itself felt mean. Emma was behind the counter at TechStop, her hands deep in the guts of a shattered tablet, when she heard the door slam open. In walked Chelsea Moore, high heels clicking, designer bag swinging. Chelsea had been Ridgewood High's golden girl, now a small-town influencer with a phone always in her hand and an audience always watching. "Hey, nerd girl," Chelsea said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Fix this, will you?" She tossed her latest iPhone on the counter like it was trash. Emma wiped her hands and reached for it, keeping her eyes down. "It might take a couple of days," Emma said quietly. Chelsea scoffed loud enough for the whole store to hear. "Wow, some things never change. Huh? Still slow. Still sad." The two friends with her, both dressed like they walked out of a magazine, snickered. One of them pulled out her phone, already filming. That was when Max appeared. He had slipped in through the back door, curious and careful, his small head peeking around the corner. Before Emma could stop him, he padded forward, tilting his head at Chelsea with those bright, sharp eyes. Chelsea's jaw dropped. "Oh my God, what is that thing?" The girls burst out laughing. "Is this your boyfriend now?" Chelsea mocked, pointing at Max. "Makes sense. You always were weird." Emma's cheeks burned, her hands gripping the counter so tight her knuckles went white. Max, sensing the shift, moved closer to her, his tiny hand brushing against her arm like he was trying to protect her. The laughter kept coming louder, sharper, bouncing off the walls of the store. Gary poked his head out of the office, annoyed. "Emma, get that animal out of here. Now." Emma swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. She bent down and whispered, "Come on, Max. Let's go." She scooped him up, his little body shaking but his eyes locked on Chelsea like he knew she was trouble. Outside, Emma sat on the curb, Max tucked into her jacket, silent tears sliding down her face. She whispered to him, her voice cracked but sure, "It is okay. We are going to be okay." And in that quiet moment, Max reached up, touching her cheek gently with his tiny hand, like he was making her a promise that neither of them would forget. Emma sat cross-legged on the worn-out carpet of her tiny apartment, the glow of her laptop casting tired shadows across the room. Max was curled up beside her, his chest rising and falling in soft, even breaths. The night was quiet, but inside Emma's head, the noise was deafening. She stared at the same frozen screen, the crypto wallet that held her lost fortune, mocking her with its locked-out message. "6 figures," she whispered into the stillness. "Gone." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. She had tried every password she could remember. Old birthdays, favorite books, random combinations. Nothing worked. And with every failed attempt, the knot in her chest tightened. The words from the store echoed in her head. "Weird, slow, sad." She shut her eyes, biting her lips so hard it stung. Images flashed behind her eyelids. Her mother walking out the door, her classmates laughing behind her back, Gary barking orders like she was nothing. She had always kept quiet, always swallowed the pain, but tonight felt different. Emma looked down at Max, who was now awake, his bright eyes locked onto hers. He reached out a tiny hand, pressing it gently against her wrist. "You are the only one who sees me, huh?" she said softly, her throat tight. She laid back, staring at the cracked ceiling. Memories of long nights learning code, buried in tech forums, flashed through her mind. She remembered the feeling of power, of knowing she had built something from nothing. That girl, the one who took risks, who believed, felt like a stranger now. But Max seemed to believe in her still. Suddenly, his little paw tapped at the laptop screen, making her sit up fast. Emma blinked, her breath catching. Max stared at the keyboard, tilting his head as if urging her. "Yeah," Emma whispered. "You think I should keep trying?" She smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Okay, buddy. One more time." Her fingers moved back to the keys, and for the first time in weeks, a flicker of something stirred in her chest. A spark, small but alive. Hope. The next morning, Emma woke up to the sound of tiny taps. She squinted, disoriented, before realizing it was Max, perched on her desk, pawing at her laptop. The screen glowed faintly, the crypto wallet still mocking her from behind its password wall. Emma sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing, little guy?" Max hopped down, tugging at the corner of a crumpled notebook lying under the desk. He dragged it toward her, flipping it open with surprising care. Pages of old notes, scribbles of password ideas, sketches of code, diagrams spilled out. Emma blinked. "Wait, this old thing?" She leaned over, flipping through the mess of writing. Her eyes landed on a strange pattern she had forgotten. A mix of numbers and symbols she had jotted down months ago when brainstorming security ideas. Her heart started to race. Did you find something, Max?" The monkey just stared at her, eyes bright and fixed, like he was waiting. She typed in the strange sequence, slow, deliberate. Error. Emma let out a breath, about to close the screen, but then Max tapped the keyboard again, his paw landing on a scratched-out part of the code. Emma frowned. Hold on. She rewrote the sequence, this time fixing what she had crossed out months ago. One more try. She hit enter. Still locked. But something else happened. A tiny line of code at the bottom flickered, something she had never seen before. A glitch? Or a clue? Emma's eyes narrowed. That's not supposed to be there. For the first time in weeks, her mind felt sharp again, puzzle pieces shifting into place. She looked down at Max, who was calmly munching on a peanut butter cracker, completely unbothered. A soft laugh escaped her lips. "You are smarter than you look, buddy." Later that day, as Emma stood outside the shop, Jake, the new delivery guy, walked by and gave her a long, thoughtful glance. "That monkey of yours?" he said, tilting his head. "Is he always this sharp?" Emma shrugged, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. "He has his moments." Jake smirked. "I don't know. Seems like you two have more going on than you let on." Emma watched him walk away, her eyes narrowing, the gears in her mind already turning. Little by little, something was shifting. And Max? He just climbed onto her shoulder, eyes scanning the street like he was in on the secret. Because maybe he was. The shop was buzzing with noise when Chelsea stormed in again, this time with a fresh phone problem and twice as much attitude. Emma glanced up from her workbench, already bracing herself. "Wow," Chelsea drawled loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still here, huh? Thought you'd have upgraded by now. Or at least gotten rid of that thing." She pointed straight at Max, who was perched quietly on the counter, eyes following every movement with sharp focus. Emma stayed calm, keeping her eyes on the device in her hands. "Do you need your phone fixed or just want to talk?" A couple of customers snickered. Chelsea's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Careful," she said, leaning in close, her voice dripping with venom. "You do not want to push me. I could have this place shut down if I wanted." At that, Max shifted, slowly at first but deliberate, his little paws creeping toward Chelsea's purse. Emma noticed too late. In one quick move, Max reached out and tugged the zipper down with perfect precision. A small USB stick tumbled out, clattering onto the counter. Chelsea froze. The room went silent. Emma's eyes narrowed. "What's this?" Chelsea's face was drained of color. "That's none of your business," she snapped, snatching it up and stuffing it back into her bag. Gary poked his head out of the office, eyes sharp. "Everything okay out here?" Chelsea forced a smile. "Fine, just a little misunderstanding." But her hands were shaking. Emma exchanged a glance with Max, her pulse thudding. There was something on that USB. She could feel it. Chelsea turned to leave, but not before throwing one last shot over her shoulder. "Keep that filthy monkey away from me." Emma watched her go, her jaw set. For the first time, she did not feel small. She felt ready. Max jumped onto her shoulder, his little hand resting against her neck, steady and warm. Emma whispered, almost to herself, "We are not just fixing phones anymore, are we?" And Max's sharp eyes never left the door, like he knew. This was just the beginning. The storm hit 2 days later, not the weather, but something far bigger. Emma sat at her laptop late at night, Max curled beside her, the glow of the screen lighting up his soft fur. She had not been able to stop thinking about that USB Chelsea tried to hide. Something about it gnawed at her, kept her awake long after the rest of Ridgewood went to sleep. Max suddenly stirred, tapping his paw against the laptop. Emma blinked. realizing she had fallen into a daze. And then her eyes caught something, that glitch from before. It was back. Her pulse quickened. She followed the trail of code like her life depended on it. Fingers flying, unlocking layers she had long forgotten. And then, it happened. The crypto wallet blinked. Access granted. Emma gasped, slapping a hand over her mouth as the numbers spilled across the screen. Her fortune, every cent, back where it belonged. After all this time, she stared in disbelief, tears filling her eyes. And Max? He simply hopped onto the desk, patting the keyboard like he had known all along. Emma laughed through her tears. "You are a genius, Max." But that was not the only surprise. The next morning, while Emma sipped coffee and stared at her recovered wallet, her email pinged. A new message. From Jake. Subject, "We need to talk." Confused, she opened it. The message was short but hit like lightning. "I know who you are now, and I know what you own." Emma's heart pounded. What did he mean? Minutes later, a second message came through, this time with an attachment. A legal document. Property records. Emma's eyes widened. Her crypto fortune had been reinvested without her knowing, thanks to auto-trading bots she set up years ago, and it had grown bigger than she imagined. Not just money. She was now the official owner of the entire strip mall where TechStop sat, including Gary's shop. Emma sat back, breathless, Max watching her closely, his eyes as steady as ever. She whispered, smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. "Looks like things are about to change, buddy." And Max? He climbed up to her shoulder, eyes sharp and unblinking, waiting. The next morning, Emma walked into TechStop like nothing had changed, except everything had. Gary was already grumbling behind the counter, shuffling papers when she stepped through the door. "You are late," he barked, not even looking up. Again. Emma smiled quietly. Max perched confidently on her shoulder. Not for long. Before Gary could snap back, the bell over the door jingled, and in walked Jake, this time in a crisp suit, holding a folder thick with papers. Gary frowned. "Can I help you?" Jake's smile was polite but sharp. "Actually, I am here on behalf of the new property owner. Official business." Gary squinted. "What are you talking about?" Jake's eyes slid over to Emma, who stood calmly, watching it unfold. "Emma Carter," Jake announced, opening the folder with a flourish, "is now the legal owner of this entire property, including this shop." The room went dead silent. Gary's face twisted in confusion, then panic. "What? No, that has to be some mistake." Emma stepped forward, her voice even and clear. "No mistake, Gary. The papers are real." Gasps rippled from the few customers in the store. Someone whispered, "Did you know about this?" Gary stumbled back, grabbing at the counter for balance. You cannot just walk in here and..." Jake cut him off smoothly. "Actually, she can. And she just did." And then, as if on cue, Max leaped gracefully onto the counter, landing right on Gary's messy stack of papers. His sharp eyes locked onto him like a tiny sentinel. Gary started, speechless. Emma's eyes met his, calm but unshakable. "I think it is time you start packing." Word spread fast. Within hours, the entire plaza buzzed with the news. People whispered in shock, piecing together the story they never saw coming. The quiet girl with the monkey had just turned the tables. And no one, especially Gary, was laughing now. Gary stood frozen, his face pale as paper, gripping the counter like it might save him. The crowd inside the shop had thickened, curious faces pressing closer, phones already out, capturing every second. Emma stepped forward, her voice calm but with an edge that cut deep. "You spent years talking down to me, making me feel small. But here's the truth, Gary. I was never small. You just never looked close enough." Jake handed over the final set of documents. "As of today, Emma is not only your landlord but has full authority to terminate your lease, effective immediately." Gary's mouth opened and closed, his eyes darting around like he was searching for someone to save him. You cannot do this. I gave you a job." Emma raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "No, Gary, you gave me scraps, and you made sure I never forgot it. But Max and I, we figured out who we are." She looked down at Max, who sat tall on the counter, staring Gary down with his bright, watchful eyes. The little monkey placed a paw on the folder, as if sealing the moment. "You have 30 days to clear out," Emma said firmly. "And after that, you are done here." A ripple of gasps and murmurs filled the shop. Chelsea, who had wandered in to witness the chaos, crossed her arms and muttered under her breath, "Wow, did not see that coming." Emma's eyes slid to her, calm but sharp. "And as for you, I would think twice before laughing at people who are busy building things you will never understand." The room fell into an almost respectful silence. Jake turned to Emma, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "What do you want to do with this place now?" Emma's eyes softened as she looked around the shop that once felt like a cage. "We are going to rebuild it into something that actually helps people." She turned to the small crowd. "Tech classes, free repairs for low-income families, real opportunities." Applause broke out, slow at first, then louder. Max hopped onto Emma's shoulder, his little face glowing with pride. That day, Ridgewood saw justice. Not loud, not cruel, but smart, steady, and impossible to ignore. And the girl with the monkey, she had just claimed her place at the top. A few months passed and Ridgewood started to look different. The old tech stop sign was gone, replaced with a bright new banner, Carter Community Tech Center. Inside, the space had transformed. No longer cluttered and dim, but open, bright, filled with long tables and rows of laptops. Kids sat side by side with seniors, learning coding, fixing devices, building new skills that once seemed out of reach. Emma walked through the rows with a quiet smile, answering questions, offering help where needed. Her eyes sparkled with something Ridgewood had never seen in her before: confidence. And Max? He had become a local legend. People from across town came by just to see him, snapping photos as he padded gracefully through the aisles. He wore a tiny custom vest now, with a patch that read, "Honorary Tech Assistant." Kids adored him, especially when he performed little tricks, pressing power buttons, fetching cables with his tiny hands. The whispers about Emma had changed, too. "She's the one who turned it all around," someone murmured as she passed. "And that monkey, he's part of the magic." Even Gary, now running a much smaller shop 2 towns over, had disappeared from the town's daily buzz, his name fading while Emma's kept rising. One afternoon, Jake stopped by, leaning on the doorway with a grin. "It is incredible, Emma. You really did it." Emma looked around the center, her eyes soft. "Not just me." She bent down, scratching Max behind the ears. He chirped happily, curling into her lap like he belonged there all along. Jake smiled. "What's next?" Emma gazed out the big front window, sunlight streaming across the tables. Her voice was calm but sure. "We keep building. For everyone." Max climbed onto her shoulder, eyes bright and steady, as if he knew the road ahead was just as important as the one behind them. And for the first time, Ridgewood felt whole. 1 year later, the Carter Community Tech Center had become the beating heart of Ridgewood. What was once a quiet, overlooked corner of town now hummed with life and purpose. New signs hung proudly out front, and a mural stretched across the side wall. A bright, bold painting of Emma and Max, side by side, with the words, "Stronger Together." Emma stood at the front desk, scrolling through a new batch of workshop signups. The waitlist had doubled. Kids, parents, retirees, everyone wanted in. Max sat perched next to her, tail flicking gently, watching with those same sharp eyes that had never left her side. Jake entered, waving a folder. "You will not believe this," he said, breathless. "We just got approved for state funding. Big funding." Emma's eyes widened, her hand flying to her chest. "Are you serious?" Jake grinned. "It is official. You are not just local news anymore. People are talking about this center everywhere." Emma looked down at Max, her heart swelling. "We did it, buddy." Outside, kids played in the sunshine, their laughter spilling through the windows. A little girl paused near the mural, staring up at Max's painted face, her eyes full of wonder. Emma stepped outside, taking in the warm breeze, the noise, the life blooming all around her. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it all in. Then she whispered, her voice full of quiet certainty, "Funny, isn't it? Saving him ended up saving me." Max jumped onto her shoulder, wrapping his tiny arms around her neck, as if to say he already knew. And together, they stood in the golden light, ready for whatever came next. If this story inspires you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. And do not forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one. See you in the next chapter.